PRN was held on the 12th of August and we all know the outcome.
Yeah, it was a 3-on-3 tie between PN and PH plus PN coalition.
But this time round, although everything seems like it's remaining at status quo, but I believe there are some undertone things that is really worth talking about.
Yeah, so what are they? So over 9.67 million registered voters, or about 1/3 of Malaysian population, were eligible to vote. At the same time, Kuala Terengganu parliamentary by-election was also held on the same day. Following the victory of the past candidate was nullified because he was found guilty of bribery and losing the seat won in November last year. The Election Commission had predicted that 85% turnout for the state election after experiencing a huge turnout of 74.4% in GE15. But somehow when I went to cast my vote in my constituency, the feedback from family and friends who participated in this state election, they had the feeling that they were substantially lower voters who turned out. So much so that they didn't even need to queue, and the whole voting process took less than 5 minutes, including walking and finding their voting stations.
But when that happened, many people began to worry that if the turnout rate is low, the election result may not reflect the true voice of the people. But it is what it is. The PRN15 concluded and we are quite fascinated by the results. Firstly, in Terengganu, there are a total of 32 seats contested in the Terengganu state election according to the EC. Terengganu registered the highest number of turnout rate with a record of 75.8%. So it is quite safe to say that Terengganu state election result is most closely reflected to the people's voice compared to 5 other states. For context, Kedah had a turnout rate of 73.9%, which came in second, then followed by Penang 72.7%, Selangor 72%, Negeri Sembilan 68.4%, and Kelantan 61%. Anyway, what am I fascinated by Terengganu is that out of the 32 states contested, all of it were won by PN. This means there's literally no opposition in the Terengganu State Assembly. You know what? What's interesting is this, even the by-election result in Kuala Terengganu was fascinating. Again, it was won by PAS. Remember, at the federal level, they have also 8 parliamentary seats. So literally now it means both state level representation and also federal representation for Terengganu is fully passed. Now remember just now I talked about the by-election. This is really interesting because what happened was this by-election was triggered because there was an accusation of bribery and therefore losing the seat from one of the past member in November last year. But when this by-election was triggered, even without any bribery, also they win. So actually, why need a bribe in the first place? So the people of Terengganu have spoken and I guess they are quite happy with the current governance and development brought about by PAS in the state, therefore giving them even more autonomy in state and parliamentary legislation. And you know what? This actually means a lot when it comes to investment and development in the place with extreme results like Terengganu going forward. But we're gonna get to it in a bit. Hey guys, do you know we just launched our newsletter? If you would like to have some exclusive weekly financial tips, some of our thoughts behind the scene, and
My thoughts about the market?
you can go to www.mrmoneystv.com to sign up for the newsletter. When you subscribe for the newsletter, you will get a retirement calculator. So what you waiting for? Sign up now!
So on the surface, the state election result is pretty much anticipated. It was a status quo of 3-3, where PH plus BN retained power in Selangor, Penang and Negeri Sembilan, while PN, through PAS mainly, retained power in Terengganu, Kelantan and Kedah. But thanks to the landslide victory in Terengganu and a super strong foothold in Kelantan and Kedah this time round, out of the total 245 seats contested in all 6 states, PN managed to secure 2/3 majority in terms of popular vote. Meanwhile, DAP of Pakatan Harapan also did extremely well, where they only lost 1 seat out of the 47 seats that they contested in all 6 states. The point I want to make is that in this state election, PAS and DAP were the main political dominants among Malays and non-Malays. Since both political parties have very different worldviews, it seems to me that the development difference between the East Coast and the West Coast of Malaysia will be even more drastically different in the next 5 years. On one hand, the West Coast states of Penang, Selangor and Negeri Sembilan will be more more focusing on driving the economic growth with data and statistics like driving up GDP per capita or minimizing unemployment rate, while the other side of Peninsular Malaysia will be focusing a little bit more on religious way of life of development.
Now you may be wondering, why are we still talking about election when we just finished voting 8 months ago? Political fatigue way. Well, remember the one that we voted 8 months ago was actually general election, where the rakyat voted for 222 parliamentary representation to form the federal government. As many of you may know, in the past, usually state election was held together with general election. So you actually only go out, vote one time, and they'll give you 2 pieces of paper, then you one-shot team everything lah. But what happened was this. During the G15 8 months ago, there were 6 states that chose not to go ahead with their respective state election and decided to just wait until their full term to expire first. And that's the reason why people from the 6 states were being called to vote again now.
The state election is just as important as the general election. To understand why, first we need to talk about the federal and state legislative powers in Malaysia. The federal government is often in charge of policy making at the national level, such as citizenship, defense, internal security, civil and criminal law, finance, trade, commerce and industry, education, labor, and tourism. Whereas each state, through its legislative assembly, has legislative power over matters like land, local government, Sharia law and Sharia courts, state holidays, and state public works. Sometimes, the state governments are also in charge of water supplies and housing. But the tricky part about these 2 items is that if the state has conflicting measures with the federal government on those matters, federal law will prevail over state law.
Okay, this is where the problem starts. And let me explain to you by giving you some possible scenario based on the latest state election result. Now, we all know Penang is one of the world's most important electronics and semiconductor supply chain hub. And since the federal government desired to leverage on that, take advantage to lure the EV makers into Malaysia, it may come up with policies and incentives like giving out licenses, tax breaks to attract global EV related companies to set up facilities in Malaysia. Suppose an EV giant is attracted to come to Malaysia, great! Then the next thing that they need to do is to find a piece of land and build its factory. Penang is a great option because of the well-established semiconductor supply infrastructure in place. But Penang may not have big enough land to cater for the EV giant's appetite, right? So the next best option would be to find a place that is in close proximity to Penang so that it is still able to tap into Penang's semiconductor supply chain. So naturally, one of the alternative options is for them to set up a factory 43 kilometers away at Kulim High Tech Park in Kedah, a place that is close enough to reach all the necessary infrastructure and resources it needs to run its factory.
Based on the state election results, PN is now the government in Kedah as opposed to the federal government, which is PH. And again, we know how drastically different politicians' opinions are on many matters. One party may think that bringing in foreign direct investments is good for economic growth, while the other party might think foreigners coming in means importing foreign cultures that could go against the local custom. Both of them are right. But the point here is that because of the difference in their worldviews, the PN government in Kedah may deem the EV giant unfit for their development objective and turn them away after tremendous effort put forth by the PH federal government attracting them in. To bring it to the extreme, this phenomenon would be more radical in Terengganu, where there's no opposition at all in the state government. Politicians there may just go against everything that the federal government proposes because there's zero check and balance in the state legislative assembly.
Nonetheless, on a broader scale, the truth is this state election result, it's kinda expected already lah. This means for most investors, they already kind of have an expectation that moving forward, this federal government will have to deal with all these PN states to have smoother implementation. Because PH didn't win all the state ma, so have to work together lor. Anyhow, now we have wrapped up the PRN. For the next 4 years, this current government will have ample time to implement all these fundamental economical reforms in this nation. That way, with no more big political distraction, hopefully this current government will be able to deliver the promises that they have made. At the end of the day, as a rakyat, the state election serves as a 5 years one responsibility to choose a representative for the state that we are living in. So he or she who is elected should be capable to address local issues and develop local areas to be more livable and more vibrant. Now, end of the day, this person should also be capable enough to deal with the federal counterparts, regardless of whether is it the same party or different party. This is very important because it ensures the state is not left out when the country is being driven into new heights.
Well, on the other hand, as an investor, the conclusion of the state election means no more politicking and everybody should go back to work. Though there are still some politicians making noises, urging the losers to step down. But that noise is negligible if the majority of policymakers focus on nation building and bringing more prosperity to Malaysia.